The crystal glasses caught the restaurant's warm light like tiny stars. Everyone's face turned toward me, smiling, expectant. The first in our family to graduate university. My mentor sat beside me, beaming. Extended family members held their phones ready to capture the moment. Then my father stood, raising his glass high. To Khalil he announced, his voice carrying across the private dining room. The one with real vision, not just grades. The table erupted in laughter. He was talking about my younger brother, who sat 3 seats away, grinning. Amira's our backup plan, my father continued, eyes sliding past me like I was furniture. But Khalil? He's the future of this family. Chairs shifted uncomfortably. My aunt looked down at her plate. My mentor's smile froze. The photographer lowered his camera. I felt every pair of eyes swing back to me, waiting to see if I would crumble like they expected. Instead, something quiet settled in my chest. "Excuse me," I whispered, placing my napkin on the table. I walked to the restroom with steady steps, heels clicking against marble floors. Nobody followed. I stood in the restroom mirror, watching my reflection. My lipstick was still perfect. My graduation dress still unwrinkled. But something had shifted behind my eyes. Outside, I could hear their voices continuing. Laughter drifted under the door. The party went on without me, as if nothing had happened, as if the guest of honor hadn't just been publicly dismissed at her own celebration. This was supposed to be my night, my graduation dinner. 4 years of perfect grades, internships, scholarships, 4 years of building something they never saw. I pressed my palms against the cool marble counter and breathed slowly. No tears came. They'd stopped coming years ago. When I finally returned to the dining room, dessert was being served. My chair waited empty, but the conversation hadn't paused. Khalil was telling a story about his latest business idea. Everyone listened like he was revealing secrets of the universe. I sat quietly, ate my cake, and said nothing. But I didn't go back. Not to the table's energy. Not to the house that night. And not to the version of me they thought they knew. At my graduation dinner, my father said I'd never amount to much. I didn't argue. I didn't argue because arguing had never changed anything in that house. Not when I brought home straight A's and got a lecture about being too focused on school. Not when I earned a full scholarship and heard how I was lucky, not smart. Not when I worked 3 jobs to avoid asking them for money. I didn't argue because he had no idea what I'd done. What I'd built. What I'd been building while they thought I was just studying too much. He thought I needed him. That was his first mistake. He thought my silence meant surrender. That was his second. For years, I'd learned to speak their language: quiet compliance, useful productivity, invisible competence. They mistook my efficiency for emptiness, my independence for insignificance. But silence isn't the same as submission. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's the space you create to build something they can't control, can't diminish, can't take credit for. They wanted a backup plan. What they got was someone who never needed a backup at all. My name is Amira Hassan. I'm 24 years old, honor graduate from State University. Business degree, full scholarship, Dean's List every stir. Internships at 3 major companies before I could legally drink. I've been helping run my father's consulting business since I was 17, managing his books without credit, organizing his files without recognition, fixing his mistakes without acknowledgement. No trust fund, no family connections, no soft landing. Just me, quietly building skills while they looked the other way. Learning systems while they dismissed my potential. Creating value while they questioned my worth. I taught myself coding during summer breaks, studied financial markets during family vacations, built a network of mentors while they wondered why I spent so much time on the computer. Every achievement was met with moving goalposts. Every success was minimized or attributed to luck, but I kept building anyway. Not for their approval, but because I finally understood something. Their limitations weren't mine. Their vision of my future didn't have to match my own. From the outside, we were perfect. The kind of family that looked good in holiday photos. Mother in pearls and designer scarves, always camera ready. Father in tailored suits, handshake firm, smile practiced. Khalil in the latest sneakers and branded everything, effortlessly charming. Family business, family brunches, family reputation. But behind every perfect picture was me. Unpaid assistant, invisible organizer, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly so they could look successful. I scheduled their meetings, typed their emails, managed their calendars, researched their decisions, fixed their technology, balanced their books. When clients complimented the business's efficiency, they thanked my father. When deals closed on time, they credited his leadership. When problems disappeared overnight, they assumed it was natural order. They never asked who was working until 2 a.m. to make their mornings seamless. They never wondered how their disorganized impulses turned into polished presentations. I was the infrastructure they took for granted, the foundation they never looked down to see. In our house, praise was for Khalil, silence was for me. If I brought home an A, they asked why I didn't have an internship. If I got an internship, they asked why it wasn't paid. If I got paid, they asked why I still lived at home. Nothing was ever enough, and everything was always questioned. Meanwhile, Khalil could crash a car and get sympathy for the stress of expectations. He could fail a class and receive a tutor. He could quit jobs and get encouragement to find his passion. His mistakes were growing pains, mine were character flaws. His potential was limitless, mine was conditional. When he talked about his dreams, they listened with genuine interest. When I mentioned mine, they offered practical concerns about realistic expectations. I learned to stop mentioning dreams altogether. Instead, I learned to build them quietly, in spaces they couldn't reach. Late nights when the house was asleep, early mornings before they woke, weekends when they assumed I was just studying. While they planned his future, I built my own. I wasn't loved in that house, I was used. Love asks questions. How was your day? What are you working on? What do you need? Use gives instructions. Can you handle this? Fix that. Make sure this doesn't happen again. Love celebrates achievements. Use expects them. Love sees potential. Use sees productivity. I became expert at being useful, typing their emails faster than they could think, solving problems before they knew problems existed, anticipating needs they hadn't expressed. But usefulness isn't the same as value. Efficiency isn't the same as worth. Even my graduation dinner wasn't really mine. It was another stage for Khalil's spotlight. Another opportunity for my father to practice his favorite narrative, the golden son and his supporting cast. I'd been cast as the reliable daughter, the one who'd always be there, always be grateful, always be manageable. They'd written my role so thoroughly they forgot I might write my own story. That was their mistake. Khalil was everything they wanted in an heir, charming, confident, photogenic. He had the kind of easy smile that made people want to invest in whatever he was selling. He was also reckless, unfocused, and completely unprepared for real responsibility. When he crashed the car I'd helped save money for, I got lectured about creating stress in the family by asking practical questions about insurance. When he quit his third job in 2 years, they praised his unwillingness to settle. When his latest business idea involved selling products he didn't understand to customers he'd never researched, they called it innovative thinking. I watched him pitch concepts I'd seen fail in case studies. I watched him make promises he couldn't keep to people who trusted our family name. And I watched our parents nod along, convinced they were witnessing genius. He wasn't evil. He was just someone who'd never had to doubt himself, never had to work for attention, never had to prove his worth. He was the heir. I was the help. Until I wasn't. I learned silence as survival. In our house, explanations made everything worse. If I defended myself, I was arguing. If I clarified facts, I was making excuses. If I expressed frustration, I was being dramatic. So I built silence like armor, spoke when spoken to, answered in short, factual sentences, disappeared into work when tension rose. They mistook this for compliance, for weakness, for proof that I knew my place. Really, it was strategy. Every quiet moment was space to think, to plan, to observe without being observed. While they talked, I listened. While they made assumptions, I gathered facts. While they credited Khalil with intelligence he hadn't earned, I built intelligence they couldn't see. Silence taught me patience. Patience taught me timing. Timing taught me power. They thought my quietness meant I had nothing to say. They were wrong. I was just waiting for the right moment to let my actions speak louder than words ever could. What they didn't know, during my final year of university, I was offered a co-founder position in a fintech startup. Not just an internship. Not just a job, partnership. The startup was something I'd helped build from scratch. During late nights, they thought I spent studying too much. Market research they dismissed as school projects. Financial models they'd never bothered to ask about. We were developing software that streamlined small business accounting. Something I understood intimately, having managed my father's chaotic bookkeeping for years. The company needed seed funding, real money, strategic investment. I had access to networks they didn't know I'd built. Mentors who saw my potential even when my family couldn't. Professors who'd connected me with alumni in venture capital. More importantly, I had documentation. Every improvement I'd made to my father's systems, every process I'd streamlined, every client relationship I'd helped nurture. All quietly filed away. All legally mine. I'd been building equity while they thought I was just being helpful. The offer letter sat in my apartment drawer, waiting for my signature. Waiting for the right moment. The morning after graduation dinner, they acted like nothing had happened. Mom made pancakes, humming softly. Dad read financial news at the kitchen table, occasionally muttering about market trends. Khalil scrolled through his phone, probably planning his next venture. Normal family breakfast. Normal family dynamics. Dad looked up when I entered. Amira, can you review the Johnson account today? I think there might be discrepancies. I poured coffee slowly, buying time. No, just that. No explanation, no excuse, no alternative suggestion. Mom's humming stopped, Dad's newspaper rustled. Khalil glanced up from his screen. A flicker of confusion crossed Dad's face, like a computer processing an unexpected command. What do you mean, no? I sipped my coffee. I mean, I'm not available today. They exchanged glances. This wasn't how I was supposed to respond. I was supposed to be efficient, accommodating, grateful for the opportunity to be useful. But I wasn't feeling particularly grateful anymore. Are you feeling all right? Mom asked, concern laced with suspicion. I'm fine, I said. Just busy. I finished my coffee and left. They thought I was being sensitive. I was being strategic. 3 days later, Khalil told our extended family that I'd dropped out of graduate school. I hadn't applied to graduate school. I had a job offer waiting. But Khalil needed a story that made sense of my new boundaries. If I wasn't being the helpful daughter they expected, something must be wrong with me. Aunt Layla called that evening, voice full of manufactured concern. Sweetheart, Khalil mentioned you're going through a difficult time. Are you okay? I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Everything's wonderful, Aunt Layla. I'm starting an exciting new project soon. Oh, that's good. What kind of project? Business development. I'll tell you more when everything's finalized. She paused, probably wondering why I sounded so confident when Khalil had painted me as struggling. Well, if you need anything. I appreciate that, I really do. After I hung up, I realized something. Khalil was already rewriting the narrative, making my independence look like instability. They thought I'd fold under family pressure. They were wrong. A week later, I discovered something interesting. Khalil was pitching a new business idea to potential investors. An app that would revolutionize small business financial management. The same concept I'd developed for my senior thesis. The same research I'd shared with him months ago when he'd seemed genuinely interested in learning about business. He'd taken my academic project, polished the presentation, and was shopping it around as his own innovation. Dad thought it was Khalil's original work. He was even helping prepare investor meetings, using our family company's conference room. They weren't just stealing my ideas. They were using my research to build Khalil's credibility as a visionary entrepreneur. The audacity was almost impressive. I made copies of everything. My original thesis, the email chains where I'd explained the concepts to Khalil, the timestamps proving when I developed each element. Then, I made some phone calls. Turns out, several of their potential investors were people I'd networked with during university. Small world. I met with a legal consultant my business ethics professor had recommended. Marcus Chen was the kind of lawyer who specialized in intellectual property and family business disputes. He listened without judgment as I explained the situation. You documented everything? He asked. Everything. Communications, timestamps, original research files. He reviewed my materials methodically. The family business paperwork, when was it last updated? I'd wondered about that too. Not in years, maybe a decade. And you've been functioning as an unofficial partner, Managing accounts, client relations, strategic planning? Yes, but never formally recognized or compensated as such. Correct. He leaned back, fingers steepled. Your contributions are well documented. Your intellectual property is clearly yours. And your father's business structure. Let's say it's outdated in ways that could work in your favor. What does that mean? It means you have more leverage than they realize, if you want to use it. I thought about Khalil's stolen presentation, about my father's dismissive toast, about years of being useful without being valued. I want to use it. I moved out on a Tuesday morning while they were at a business meeting. Not dramatically, no slammed doors or tearful confrontations. Just a moving van, boxes I'd been quietly packing for weeks, and a lease I'd signed in my own name. The apartment was small but mine. Clean lines, large windows, space to think without being interrupted. I'd been ready to leave for months. The graduation dinner had simply provided the final motivation. I left a note on the kitchen counter, moved out. We'll be in touch regarding business matters, Amira. Professional, factual, final. When they called that evening, I was already arranging furniture and didn't answer. When they called again, I was setting up my home office. By the third call, I'd finished unpacking and felt no obligation to explain myself. They thought I was being emotional, running away because my feelings were hurt. They couldn't conceive that I was being calculated, moving towards something instead of away from them. That blindness was going to cost them. Khalil launched his app 3 weeks later. The launch was spectacular. Press releases, social media campaigns, investor presentations in the family company's conference room. The app crashed on day 2. Not from overwhelming user demand. From poor coding and inadequate security protocols. Customer data was vulnerable. Financial information was exposed. Privacy laws were violated. I watched the tech blogs tear it apart from my new apartment, drinking coffee and feeling nothing resembling sympathy. He'd rushed to market without understanding the technical requirements, without researching regulatory compliance, without testing basic functionality. All things I'd covered extensively in my original thesis, the sections he'd apparently skipped while copying my market research. The app was pulled from stores within a week. Early investors started asking pointed questions about due diligence and technical competency. The family company's reputation took its first real hit. I said nothing publicly. I didn't need to. Dad called on a Sunday morning, not to apologize, not to ask how I was settling into my new place, to ask for help. Amira, we're having some cash flow issues. Khalil's project didn't go as planned, and we need your insight on the quarterly reports. My insight, not my presence as his daughter. My professional capability. I was sitting on my balcony, reading financial news and enjoying the peace of my own space. I'm not available for consulting work right now, I said. This isn't consulting, this is family. When it was my graduation dinner, you made it clear I'm backup plan. I'm treating this accordingly. Silence. Then, you're being unreasonable. I'm being consistent. You established my value. I'm respecting your assessment. I hung up and went back to my coffee. 20 minutes later, Mom called. More emotional appeal, same underlying request. I gave her the same answer. By evening, Khalil called directly, his first contact since the dinner. I didn't answer. 2 days later, I had lunch with investors from the fintech startup. Not my family, the real one. Sarah Kim and James Torres, partners at a venture capital firm that specialized in emerging financial technology. We'd been corresponding for months about market opportunities. We're interested in acquiring a legacy consulting firm, Sarah mentioned over appetizers. Something with established client relationships, but outdated systems. A company we could modernize. Interesting, I said. What kind of timeline? Immediate, if the right opportunity presents itself. We've identified several candidates, but we'd prefer working with someone who understands the business intimately. I smiled. I might know of such an opportunity. What they didn't know yet. I already owned 12% of my father's company through silent stock acquisitions. Legal purchases made over 3 years using money from my various internships and jobs. Small amounts, purchased when the company needed quick capital injections. Documented. Legal. Binding. I'd been preparing for this conversation longer than they realized. The rumors started within days. Khalil was telling people I'd stolen his business ideas. that I was sabotaging the family out of jealousy. The story grew with each telling. By the end of the week, I was supposedly running a competing firm using inside information. None of it was true. But truth wasn't the point. The point was narrative control. I released a statement through Marcus, my attorney. Brief, professional, fact-checked. No emotion. No personal attacks. Just timeline-stamped evidence of intellectual property ownership and documented business contributions. The statement included copies of my original research, email records showing when I'd shared ideas with family members, and academic timestamps proving development dates. It was devastating in its simplicity. The whispers began to shift. People started asking different questions. If Khalil had stolen my work, what else had been misrepresented? If I'd been the one managing the family business's actual operations, who was really responsible for its success? If I was competent enough to threaten them, why had they treated me as an afterthought? A formal letter arrived at my father's office on a Thursday morning. Legal notice of minority shareholder rights. Silent partnership restructuring. Board meeting requirements. My name at the bottom, next to Marcus's firm letterhead. No threats. No ultimatums, just changes. Control, quietly slipping from their hands to mine. The letter detailed my stock ownership, my documented contributions, and my rights under the company's outdated corporate structure. It also outlined new operational requirements, transparent accounting, formal role definitions, equitable profit sharing, everything they'd been avoiding for years. Dad called Marcus's office directly, demanding an explanation. Marcus politely referred him to the documentation. All legal, all binding, all properly executed during the years when they'd thought I was just being helpful. She planned this. Dad told Mom that evening. I know because Khalil called to rage about it. He was right, I had planned it, for years. Dad appeared at my apartment door on Saturday afternoon. No yelling, no accusations, just exhausted defeat. How long have you been planning this? He asked when I let him in. I offered him tea. I'm not planning anything, I'm just stopped playing along. This isn't the daughter I raised. You're right, the daughter you raised would have stayed quiet and kept making your problems disappear. He sat heavily on my couch, looking older than I remembered. What do you want, Amira? Nothing from you. I want my contributions recognized. I want transparent business practices. I want equity in something I helped build. And if we refuse, I set down my teacup carefully. Then you'll have to run the business without me. Let's see how long that lasts. We both knew the answer to that question. The company had been running on my systems, my organization, my client relationships for years. Without me, they had Khalil's charm and Dad's outdated networks. In today's market, that wouldn't be enough. Khalil found out about the startup acquisition offer when he tried to access his trust fund. The fund his father had established years ago, using company stock as collateral. Stock that was now partially controlled by someone else, someone who had voting rights and profit-sharing agreements. He called me at midnight, voice tight with panic. You can't do this. This is our family's legacy. It's my legacy too, I said calmly. I helped build it. Dad trusted you. Dad used me. There's a difference. The startup you're with, they want to buy us out completely, don't they? I didn't answer directly. They want to modernize a traditional business. Whether that includes the current management is negotiable. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're really going to destroy everything. I'm not destroying anything. I'm finally making it mine. This isn't you, Amira. You're right, this is who I am when I'm not shrinking myself to fit your comfort zone. The boardroom was smaller than I'd expected. Polished table, leather chairs, view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dad sat at one end, Khalil beside him. Mom had chosen not to attend. I sat across from them with Sarah and James, my new business partners. The conversation was formal, professional. Marcus had prepared documentation outlining the transition. I would assume majority operational control, with options for family members to maintain limited roles. Limited how? Dad asked. Non-executive positions, advisory capacity, reduced profit sharing, Sarah explained. And if we decline? Then you're welcome to compete with us, I said quietly, using whatever systems and client relationships remain yours. The room went silent. Khalil's face had gone pale. You're buying us out with our own money. I'm buying you out with money I earned, using leverage I built, through work I did. Dad stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. When did you become so, he struggled for the word. Competent? I suggested. I always was, you just never noticed. Khalil declined our offer. He tried to start something independently, using contacts he thought were family connections. Most of those contacts had been cultivating relationships with me for years. They were polite but non-committal when he called. His new venture failed within 6 months. Dad retreated from public business life, taking a consulting role that allowed him to maintain dignity while ceding actual control. Mom sent me a birthday card with no handwritten note. Just her signature, careful and distant. I felt nothing about any of it. No satisfaction, no regret, just quiet completion. The startup thrived. Our client base expanded. The systems I'd built scaled beautifully. I hired a team of smart, competent people who appreciated clarity and fairness. For the first time in my life, my contributions were visible, valued, and rewarded proportionally. I was no longer anyone's backup plan. I was the plan. Peace turned out to be quieter than revenge. I took nothing personal from them. No family photos, no sentimental objects, no attempts to punish them for years of dismissal. I simply took space. Distance became my inheritance. Silence became my boundary. I traveled to cities I'd only read about. I built projects that excited me. I laughed freely at dinners where no one questioned my worth. The company grew into something larger and more innovative than they could have imagined. We were featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, courted by major corporations. None of the coverage mentioned family legacy or inherited advantage. It focused on innovation, leadership, and vision. The future I was building had nothing to do with them. 6 months after the transition, I received a message from my university mentor. She'd seen an article about our company and wanted to congratulate me. "I knew at your graduation dinner that you were planning something," she wrote. "The way you stayed calm when anyone else would have exploded, that was strength." I'd never told her about that night, but she'd seen what my family missed. I was never worthless. I was never just a backup plan. I was just never theirs to begin with. And now I was finally mine.